Let's call this meeting to order. This is the Louisiana Parish Ordinance Committee meeting for Thursday, September 16th, 2021. Lauren, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Harris? Here. Mr. Talbert?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
And Mr. Groves?
Here. All right, we're gonna be short and sweet today, guys. We had a special meeting planned before, all hell broke loose with the hurricane and all that primarily to discuss the tiki tubing and what we're going to do that. We have rescheduled that for next Tuesday at 6. But we're just going to go forward with the standard meeting, if you will, for today. Item 2 is old business review and discussion recommendations of ordinances. I don't think other than that aforementioned, we don't have any old business at the moment. New business review discussions. Item 3, review, discussion, and recommendations of ordinances. Item A, detention ponds. Now, Mr. King, did you want to say something? I have some things I want to say kind of for us to mill on that, but you go ahead and say what you got to say. Scooter here?
Oh, now you can hear me. It muted me.
Yeah.
What about now? Well, we've discussed this before a couple of times, and what we're getting from the drainage districts and from the Citizens Drainage Board is that, we're making people put these retention ponds in. Who has to take care of them? Okay, they have HOAs to begin with, and then they all fold, and then they get in disrepair. They don't drain properly. People block them up to raise the heights of them. And my board appointment in Gravity 2 came to the cleaners to talk to me for an hour and a half, and he's like, we think the parish should maintain these, and we've talked about this, that there's so many that it would really drain a budget trying to take care of this. There's many of them that are not working the way they were designed.
So,
I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I don't know. We'll have to think in depth on how to handle the ones that exist. But going forward, I have some ideas on that.
Okay.
We're going to have to basically, for starters, every retention pond that goes in the future needs to have at least, I would say, 25 feet of servitude all the way around. So before we can even think to clean it and come up with a mechanism to have the money to do so, we have to have the ability to do it. So I think that we could do that with just an ordinance.
Yeah,
you agree, Mr. Talbert?
Yeah, I think that, actually, if I'm not mistaken, the current retention ponds have a servitude through the middle. So depending on what type of equipment you had, you actually have access to the bank of those things to do some cleaning and stuff. But, I think we probably ought to look in the past, I know I've got a subdivision that's got a retention pond and now that's really a lake.
Which is what most of them are.
We all do.
People have waterfront property, and it's a retention pond that really, because of development upstream and the fact that they put this retention pond kind of in an old creek. You know what I'm talking about? And
sure.
It really needs to be lowered, but we don't really have that ability as it's structured because we don't have control of the pond. So I really think we probably ought to look at a couple things with respect to this. One is to create a situation that we probably need to go to dry retention and quit having wet retention ponds so that, we don't create a situation where people are on waterfront property and then when you need to modify it, they're like, all of a sudden I don't have this lake behind my house anymore. No, that wasn't the original purpose. I think the other thing we probably ought to look at is if we do that, and we require that servitude, you're probably going to see those things move to a different area of a subdivision, meaning that they're not going to be, houses built around them in the future. They're going to be off.
Yeah, if you have that freeboard, that's not going to be beautiful.
Right. So, and maybe give some incentive to, you've gone in other areas of the country. I know I have, and going to universities and different places where they've utilized the ponds, for, sports facilities or parks or whatever. And in an effort, they create dry retention, and then they're able to utilize it, during parts of the year. And then when a storm develops, it holds water and then it runs off. And I think part of the problem is that, back in the day, because I had a developer talk to me a long time ago about it, that, they were fined to do retention because it allowed them to sell waterfront property. And I think we have seen the problems associated with that now is that when we need to go in and do something to a particular pond to make it probably function better, because of different changes in whatever happened upstream or downstream after that subdivision was developed, that we don't have that ability. So I think we need to get away from kind of what we're doing now with respect to retention and utilize it more of what it was designed for. And that's just to hold water during a temporary rain event. It's just temporary storage of water. And I think if we do that, we'll find that, you actually going to have the freeboard it was designed for, in lieu of, water rising or culverts failing or, culverts getting silted in, and consequently, the level changes and the freeboard doesn't
Recording
exist.
in progress.
Well, I think that, look, I have zero faith in the long-term stability of any HOA. And I think the only way you're going to maintain these things and know they're going to be maintained is for the parish to maintain them. But then you come across the cost aspect. And look, I wouldn't have a problem if we could figure out a mechanism you could put pumps in all of them. And I would have to speak, I guess, to the attorney on this. Is there a way that you could attach a fee in perpetuity for any subdivision with improvements that requires a retention pond, that the people who buy into that will pay a small amount, every month for basically forever, and then that money will always be there. If their pump breaks, they go fix it. If they need to have the pond dredged out and cleaned out, we go do it because the money's there. And we can either hit the parish do it, or we could have the drainage
Contracted out.
if the drainage district is in play there that's funded, they can do it. But I don't think it's anything that anybody that, let's say, that lives here now should have to shoulder. Look, we're talking about neighborhoods that don't exist yet. We're talking about people who, for the by and large, don't live here yet. So it shouldn't be an issue going forward if we just say, hey, look, you got to pay, I don't know, come up with $5 a month, more. And I just don't know, is there a way we can attach that to a development? I mean, what do you think?
So first, I think you're right. Moving forward, the actual physical layout of these subdivisions are going to have to change. That way, not only do we have the servitude around it, but we got to have access to it. So if you have a retention pond that's totally surrounded with houses, we're not going to be able to get back there to do it. One way that you could possibly fund it is whenever the development is first being introduced and is owned by one landowner, you can essentially have a special tax assessment on that parcel of property that's voted on by the one landowner, vote in favor of it, and then every house that's built on that property in that development is going to be subject to that extra tax assessment that's to be utilized and earmarked for that purpose.
So that would be evergreen, correct? Like forever, or right. Just a one? Okay, so we're not talking about. I'm just talking. It'd be a small amount, but you have a 300 house home subdivision. That money would add up, and you could do essentially all the drainage in there. You could clean some ditches. You could do the ponds, and if that's in that case, you could put a pump and have it pump it down between events, and it's in some cases, if they make it big enough, you could actually help drainage. That's from so if they wanted to help come in and make one big enough to help take the spill off from other areas too. If they wanted, hey, that's one of those things you give and you take. Hey, if you make it a little bigger and you help this area over here, we might help you with something that, but I do think it is necessary. If we can do that, then that's what we need to do, because no one living here now should be offended by that.
So my question is, like, sewer user fees. Sewer user fees were assessed, right? I mean, they weren't something necessarily voted on to create, a sewer district and a sewer fee to fund that district. So I'm wondering if a fee could be assessed on the maintenance of, new construction ponds going forward. And the second thing, Tracy, what you were talking about earlier that we need to consider is, right now we're looking at net neutral water runoff, and probably what we need to do if we're going to continue development through the parish without restriction, then we probably need to look at a reduction of water runoff. Meaning, if you go and develop a section of land, what we have typically looked for is a net neutral result, and probably if we continue to look net neutral, we're gonna run into a problem of development in the future. So if we look to a reduction now, if you develop a subdivision, we're looking for a 25% reduction in runoff, then you're going to get those bigger ponds that you're talking about, in an effort to help the drainage in the area. So, I think it's a bigger picture that, we're talking about retention ponds in this particular deal, but I think you got to look at the whole aspect of it is, we need to probably consider how we've designed ponds in the future and change the way we're looking at doing it. And we probably need to look at some reduction in the water runoff, a positive reduction, so that I know you've heard it, I've heard it. We need to quit letting people build because we can't handle the water we have now. But if development is gonna generate a reduction in water, in runoff, then we're actually gonna make the drainage in the parish improve as we develop it. So, look, I think it's a big picture thing that we need to look at with respect to the retention pond ordinance. But I think we got to figure out, number one, is what is the best way to create the revenue stream to maintain those ponds in the future, the new ponds that are being built.
Well, I agree, but I mean, what he was saying is,
well, I mean,
we could do it that way. I mean, we could just put it on the shoulders of
So basically, what we're basically saying is, when a developer acquires a piece of land, when he comes and brings that package, with that package needs to be a dedicated revenue stream through some form of tax that he, being the only person owning that property, approved. And then that property is attached. And then when we subdivide that property, all subdivisions of that property will then be attached to that particular fee that goes into a dedicated fund, whether it be administered by the parish or administered by the individual gravity drainage districts, solely for the cleaning of those ponds.
Correct.
Yeah, it'd be almost like a TIF for that purpose.
Right.
Yeah, I have a question. Mr. Casio, in our ordinance, it says dry detention basins shall be privately owned and maintained as part of the development drainage system. So they're privately owned right now, but if an HOA falls through and the rest of the subdivision's drainage system is maintained by a gravity drainage district or the parish, does that responsibility fall on whoever is maintaining them?
So if the drainage, if the ponds are privately owned, that responsibility is not going to fall on the parish. They're going to have to dedicate it some one way or another to allow us to spend public funds to maintain that pond.
Okay.
And that's the catch-22.
Right.
Because it was privately owned mean, the parish didn't have I guess they allowed it to be built, and then under the guise that the HOA would handle it in the future,
Right.
which is a fool's errand, because I'll be nice and say half HOAs survive, and
Right.
that's being generous.
So,
Go ahead, Gary.
so while we're talking about Old Ponds, while we're looking at that, so if we have an HOA that doesn't have the ability to maintain their pond or do the maintenance on that pond, then does the parish have the ability to go in and assess, go in and do the maintenance on that pond and then assess all the property owners associated with that development to reimburse the parish for that money, since they didn't? I mean, technically they should have belonged to an HOA. They should have funded an HOA, and the HOA should have been responsible for maintaining the pond. If the HOA was defunct, either because of lack of participation or whatever, then is it possible for the parish, if we create the ordinance? I don't know if it's legally capable of being done. If we create an ordinance that allows the parish to go in and take what corrective measures need to be taken on a particular retention pond or detention pond to make it function properly, then is the parish then able to issue a special assessment on those properties that exist because that retention pond was built? So.
Right. I understand your question. It's kind of like whenever there's like a blighted property, right? They're in violation of certain parish ordinances, and the parish has to go in and correct whatever's going on. Then you assess basically that lien against the property for the work performed by the parish.
Yeah.
The difference, I think, though, is going to be, obviously it's got to be for a public purpose. You're going to have to justify why the work is being done. If it wasn't done, what would the consequences be?
Hey,
But
guys.
then, yeah.
I was just trying to get in a comment or two.
Go ahead.
I guess number one question, I'm sorry for coming in on the tail end. Been struggling to get into these zone meetings, but why are we trying to change the way that we originally was thinking about funding with drainage impact fees, with dedicated servitudes, such that we don't really own the private property as a drainage district, but we have the ability to maintain the retention pond?
Well, we're not really talking about the drainage district. We're talking about initially we're talking about new development and how we can set it up to where the new development pays. It's part of the deal before they ever subdivide that property. The developer comes in and says, hey, I want to build a subdivision here. And we say, well, okay, you're going to have to, there's going to be, as the attorney put it, a TIF, basically a special tax for everyone who buys in that they're going to have to pay continuously.
Yeah.
Well,
and so that's the
is that in addition to the drainage impact fees that
It is
I felt
indeed.
like we had agreed to?
Well,
Move
Shane,
forward
I think the issue is that a drainage impact fee is a one-time assessment.
Right.
And the maintenance of retention ponds is going to be a recurring expense. So just like to take a one-time special windfall of tax revenue to fund a recurring expense in a budget, the reverse would be the same, in the fact that we're going to look for a revenue stream that is a one-time revenue stream to try to fund a recurring expense of maintaining ponds. So I think that I understood what you wanted to do initially with the assessment, and I think the assessment might be fine in working as a revenue stream for the
first time.
yeah, well, for the initial deal of Gravity Drainage District. However, I think when you look at retention ponds and the ongoing forever, in perpetuity of maintenance, that you got to look for the same type of revenue stream. And I think that's why this thing has kind of moved in a different direction is that we're looking, I think initially the easiest thing to address is to stop the problem that currently exists, not fix what's wrong right now, but to stop it from getting bigger by addressing the problems that we see occurring with retention ponds. So let's fix the ordinance as it exists. Let's find the revenue stream, and so that future retention ponds aren't an issue. And then we go back and try to fix the problem with old retention ponds on how to, solve those issues.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, speak.
Guys,
Mr. Chairman, can y'all
Yes.
hear Randy?
Yes, I can hear you, Randy.
Can I speak for a second?
Sure, go ahead.
I agree with what he's telling us, and I agree what you are saying. I think any subdivision, wherever it's located, has to have a fee, a monthly fee, in addition to what's already being paid. It's
Yep.
like, I want to use your words, Tracy. They have to pay for the impact they're putting on the people that already lives here.
Thank you.
And that has to be in there. And something as simple as $20 a month adds up.
It won't even
And-
need to be that much, I mean,
That's what I'm saying. And the thing about it is, if you leave it up to them, it may be mismanaged, it may not be right. And I think we could collect this, have to get attorney approval. But we used to do petition paving and blacktop roads in the old days because we didn't have a 1 cent sales tax. And we would collect that money and blacktop the roads before we collect it. And that's the same thing we could do. We could collect whatever that user fee is, we're going to charge them. And we would dedicate that money to that subdivision, whether it's ditch digging,
absolutely.
Whatever. In addition, if they belong to a drainage district, then you're talking about district wide and not just their subdivision. So they would have to pay the 2 fees because they're not just worried about getting the water from their place. Once it gets in the district, it has to leave also. So I see no problem in implementing this at all, and I'm in support of that. And just saying what you and Frog was saying, I think y'all right on. You're right.
I got a question, guys, or comment.
Go ahead.
Okay, so it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that if you collect a tax within a district, and that would be an individual district where that tax would be collected, then that money collected for that district has to be spent in that district. And
No.
so, no, you're telling me no?
I mean, I'm telling you, you're misunderstanding what we're talking about. The money will be collected in that subdivision for that subdivision only.
Correct. That's what I'm
So,
saying. And so that money could not be used for drainage improvements outside that
That is
specific
correct.
district. Am I wrong?
that is correct. It
Okay,
cannot
so
be
the
used.
intent and purpose for the original ordinance and the original drainage impact fees
We're
was
not
to-
talking. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying the original intent, in the drainage impact fees was to collect a drainage impact fee because that development affected the whole entire area, right? And so that money could be used because the intent of that drainage impact fee and that development, right, impacted the surrounding area so that money could be used to fund gravity drainage improvements across an entire district or an entire area. So what I feel like is if this is in addition to the drainage impact fees that would allow us to do that, then, I'd be willing to entertain the idea and talk more about it. But my thought is you're killing the original intent to fund Gravity Drainage District 8.
No, you can do both. I mean, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but if you want to have an impact fee, then have the impact fee. And you could use that for the entire district. But if you want to build a subdivision that requires a retention pond, and we're not talking about just keeping the pond clean, we're talking about putting in pumps that need to be maintained and electricity supplied to run them. This is going to require money. And my point on that is, and I'm sure it's most of the people here, I would guess, that expense should not be shouldered by the people who live here now. Once again, these are neighborhoods or subdivisions that do not exist yet. And those people by and large do not live here yet. So they should shoulder that. And if they don't want to, then don't buy the house. It'll be clear up front.
Look, guys, there was a comment from the audience, a private message to me, and I think if we go back, I'm going to challenge y'all to go looking at the Ascension Parish. What did they call that? It was the Capital Improvement Ordinance or Ascension Parish Road Infrastructure Ordinance, where they addressed throughout the whole parish, assessments based on size and development. Look, we're looking at something similar to that with respect to retention ponds on a small level. And I'm not disagreeing with what you wanted to do initially on 8, but when the ordinance kind of got initially put out, one of the selling points was to address retention ponds. And my thought process that was that using non-recurring revenue to fund a recurring expense was bad business. So consequently, I think we started, that thing kind of moved and started talking about retention ponds. I don't think I think what we're talking about today is retention ponds and not about the sewer impact fee as a funding mechanism for Gravity 8. I think we're talking about a retention pond problem that exists within every gravity district, and how to stop the growth of that problem by.
I would like to say something. Okay, so it's not sewer impact fees; it's drainage impact fees.
I might have misspoke, but I guess what I'm saying is it's the same basic concept. If you take a one-time fee and then try to use that one-time fee for recurring expenses, it's not going to work. And I guess what I'm saying.
Well, I agree. It should be.
The impact fee is based on what it costs to develop or build a sewer treatment plant to offset the number of gallons. So they basically said a home utilizes, let's say, 500 gallons a day. And so basically what they've determined is what the cost of 500 gallons a day sewer is in the construction of a plant. And so that's how they came up with a sewer impact fee, is basically you're paying for what it's going to cost in the future to
Mr. Talbert,
go ahead.
We're against the clock. We'll continue this.
Can I just make one statement, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Randy, go ahead, real quick.
Just one statement. To recap, I agree that they are two separate issues and there's room for both issues. We should do both. We should do a drainage impact, but for the new subdivisions, no matter where they're located, we have to have a new set of laws that pertain to them only. And y'all right on head. Y'all ahead of the curve.
I agree, Randy. Thank you. Shane, hang on. Shane's going to have the last word here. I'm going to go ahead and give it to him. Shane, 30 seconds, bud. We got to go. Or go ahead.
No,
you good?
I just want to talk about it some more. That's all. I'm open-minded. I think y'all have some great ideas, and I just want to talk about it some more. And I appreciate y'all very much.
Okay, we're against the clock, guys. We need to go. Motion to adjourn.
Motion
by Mr. King, second by Mr. Talbert. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, this meeting's adjourned. See you next Tuesday.